I'm interested in your views on how we should allocate resources and whether or not we should be siloed money according to the modality. But Lexi Giannoulis had his idea for avoiding earmarking. Congressman Kirk called himself a recovered earmarker. If you had a chance to bring in a project for this area, for this state, through use of an earmark, would you do it, and what's your view on it? And then we'll get into, because so many, the reason I'm using earmarks on this question, by the way, is because so many transportation projects could be the subject of an earmark. Your views?
I think that when we look at this national economy that we're in, nobody is going to determine who can come in first or second in terms of who's going to get it going around in terms of regionality. The earmark process for some has become a political issue, as the congressman talked about, bridges to nowhere and projects that have been funded without prudence. One of those projects that has continually been talked about is the third airport within the south suburbs in Peatone. And this is something that I think some people have looked at would be an economic generator.
No, that isn't an earmark.
It isn't an earmark, but it was something that would probably very likely have to be funded through an earmark if it was to be done. It is not a project that I feel is prudent, being the fact that if we're talking about cutting ourselves off from foreign oil and fuel dependence, I don't know why you would build an infrastructure that would be reliant upon that.
Okay, let me just, first of all, so you're for or against an earmark, just as a starting point? So
I was nuancing to the point, if you let me get to that
I'm sorry,
point.
only because
It's politics. Let me nuance to the point.
Okay.
I have to be very honest about the earmark. Many, as you heard the congressman say, that he's been against earmarks. I'm a Chicagoan and I'm an Illinoisan. And if an earmark, because the unemployment numbers for many of you are a discussion. The unemployment number is a reality for me when I live in a community where you have more unemployment, more joblessness, and more hopelessness than anywhere, which is a stimulator of the violence that we see in our communities. I would have to say right now politically that looking at these conditions and knowing that we don't see anything on the horizon in terms of private sector job creation where these people can be employed, is that I would have to look seriously at earmarks and making sure that those earmarks would appropriated within the right way to stimulate the growth that we need in this region, in this state.
Okay, and your views on how we allocate between rail, bridges, mass transit, bikeways?
I am for the high-speed rail system in Illinois. I've heard the other two candidates talk about the fact that they don't want to impose a gas tax because it hurts working people. Unfortunately, we're on both sides of this issue, and it's another one of those.
You'll tell me which side you're on?
No, the fact is I'm going to have to nuance, because it's not a right or wrong situation. Right now, if we wanted to impose, which we should be imposing a fuel tax in terms of using that money to generate the investment that we're going to need in high-speed rail and the other programs that we're going to need to create energy independence. We should be doing that. But the reason we can't do that is situations that happened like on the red line yesterday. What happens when we begin to push people to using more efficient modes of transportation, but the infrastructure has been, the lack of investment and infrastructure has been such that if we did impose that tax, we leave people on both sides of the fence without having a substantive things that we need done.
Okay, so if I could try for clarity, though, if a gas tax were proposed, you would look at it, or you're not open to it?
I would have to seriously look at it, because we can't continue to be.
Your answer is a yes.
I would seriously, I didn't say yes. I said we're going to have to seriously look at it.
Seriously, maybe. Okay.
It's not seriously, maybe. The thing is that you're not understanding both sides of the issue.
No,
man.
I'm just trying. I am, because we don't have.
If you are understanding both sides of the issue, what other side of the issue am I talking about?
I'm trying to get you to clarify for all our people here. If you could tell us where you sit in the gas tax, and then we'll move on to other issues.
Like I'm saying, I would have to seriously look at the gas tax.
Okay.
The reason that I'll have to seriously look at it is because we have to fund this massive infrastructure build out in terms of transportation in our economy. Right now, because we have not made the investments over the long term, before we got to this day, right now the RTA says we need $24 billion over the next 10 years to be able to keep our rail infrastructure in terms of Chicago, CTA, Metra viable. We have not done that. So in essence, to impose a fuel tax and not have that infrastructure there would only create situations like we've experienced where people have been on trains, those trains have stopped because they're inoperable, maybe not should have been there, but because we've not made the upgrade in capital expenditures, we are at a boondoggle between both.
Okay, and may I ask you, since you're new on the political scene, and I don't know where you stand on this, I asked that your two rivals, cap and trade, you would be where?
Cap and trade, again, unfortunately, we are at a juncture where we shouldn't be right now with energy. Right now, to impose cap and trade is going to put an undue burden on our industries right now who have been strained as the economy has not generated it needs to be. I don't want to impose a tax on an industry right now, especially within the American manufacturing sector that has lost a tremendous amount of jobs due to cheap labor. I don't want to force them further into economic stalemates. However, we do have to look forward, and if we want to have the sustainable economy we want in 2040, we're going to have to make those hard decisions today. And so would I be for a cap and trade? Again, it is one of those things that we cannot discuss here in a yes and no situation. It's one of those things that is going to have to be politic because it is for the future. But if it came down to cap and trade, again, I mean, we are at a recession. We are at a recession that could go into a double-dip recession. And I don't want to make policies that are going to exacerbate that any more than I need to.
Well, as we transition into our lake question, I want to ask you what I've asked the others, dealing with deep oil drilling in the wake of the BP oil catastrophe on the coast. President Obama has proposed a 6-month moratorium on deep water drilling. Should we have it? Should it be longer? And what about a moratorium on shallow water drilling?
Energy dependence is the only way that we're going to get ourselves out of this problem. The more that we import foreign oil, the more we allow ourselves to be in situations that really that have us infringing on other people's sovereignty. When it comes to oil drilling offshore, I have had a very vociferous debate with people in my party because if we want to get to this green economy, there are still existing, we are a very heavily reliant society on oil, and that is not going to change overnight. I believe that offshore drilling, I believe in the moratorium right now that the president has enacted in order to study what allowed this ecological catastrophe to happen. But for me, being a young man that has some understanding in business, I just have to look at what BP did wrong to make sure we do what's right. And one of the things that I can look at in a very cursory way to look at is that any industry such as oil exploration and a company like BP that is involved in that, there is, if you look on the balance sheet of companies like that, the largest expense for a company like that before you get to the profits anybody talk about is the investments within capital expenditures and in terms of upgrading equipment and making sure that it is safe. And one thing that I can look at and looking at the enormous amounts of revenue that BP was generating, they did it at the expense of not managing their capital expenses right. If that is meant to be had, then we have a lot of oil companies out there that are probably doing it the right way. And I don't want to punish those industries, nor do I want our national oil reserves to become more dependent on foreign oil and foreign oil speculation, which we do not control.
Thank you. Moving out to our lake question. You know, there are issues dealing with water supply, Illinois' allocation. That's in the question about making sure it's available in the long term. I'd like you to address that, but before you go there, and this will be our last question, could you tell me your thoughts on reversing the Chicago River, which is something now under consideration by very long-range planners?
The reversing of the Chicago River is very interesting because if we're going to, I just thought about this when the congressman mentioned the fact that he wants to build out nuclear power plants. Where are you going to put these nuclear power plants except next to places where you have water to make sure that the reactors can stay cool? Well, reversing the Chicago River and knowing that if that were proposed, that they would probably be at sites adjacent to the Chicago River, we would put ourselves in jeopardy of potentially contaminating the 1/5 of the Lord's freshwater resource. I would have to seriously look at the issue in terms of what is the feasibility? Are there more contaminants inland that can go outland in terms of if we did do that? And that's one thing that has to be looked at. And I think, unfortunately, it's not one of those points that a yes or no answer can be given here to make sure that to satisfy your inquiry.
And what about the bigger picture as we close of how we can use our Lake Michigan water in the Great Lakes to help sustain the region?
Funny thing, campaign manager pointed out, he said, make sure when you get up there and you talk, mention the fact of how many dishes we have. We have about 3 or 4 forks. We have plates, 3 or 4 plates. I wonder how much water we're going to need to clean that up if we just, broke down and just had a more simpler display on our tables. I think that on the long term, we have to look at water efficiency. We have to look at creating communities and homes that can recycle water in terms of their daily usage. I'm one of those people that probably turn on the shower before I do and let it run. We need to be more efficient in how we manage this system, because it will emerge to be, going forward in 2040, Lake Michigan is probably our greatest commodity. We have 1/5 of the world's fresh water reserve, and I want to be able to manage it no differently than if I were OPEC.
Okay. A lot